The processes that we'll review here describe the manner in which many normal body processes work. Specifically, passive transport processes are those that occur within the body without the requirement of energy. The first process that we'll review is known as simple diffusion. As we begin, this example really is meant to set the stage for us to understand the next few processes. In this example, let's consider that we have a lump of sugar placed into a cup of water. As this lump of sugar is placed into the cup, one of the things that we can expect is for the sugar molecules to initially be clumped together. Over time, within the cup of water, we'll notice that molecules of sugar from our initial clump begin to diffuse throughout the cup. Now, just for clarity's sake, let's define the term diffuse. Diffuse means to spread out over a wide area, and that's exactly what these molecules do. Now, let's take what we've seen here and utilize it to describe in a more practical sense how this process takes place in the body. Now that we have a basic understanding of the term diffusion, let's review this again, but this time in relation to what is known as the semi-permeable membrane. This process represents an authentic diagram of how diffusion occurs in the body. The red lines that we see in each cup represent this membrane, so let's define what this means exactly. A semi-permeable membrane is one that only allows select items to flow through it, hence the name semi, which means half, and permeable. The molecules that can pass through it are usually small in nature. So now, using the same example from before, let's consider that we have a lump of sugar placed into our cup of water. Let's also establish exactly what we have pictured here. The cup of water represents the confines of the inner and outer portions of a given cell, with of course half representing the inside and the other half the outside of the cell. The way this process works is just the same as what we saw before. The molecules of sugar are going to diffuse throughout the cup of water. This time, let's consider that the molecules of sugar have the ability to diffuse through this semi-permeable membrane. In order for this to occur, the molecules of sugar will move down their concentration gradient. That is to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. The high concentration refers to where most of the molecules are initially, and in this case they are higher on the inside of a given cell, allowing the molecules to spread to areas where the concentration was initially low or non-existent. So as we look at the cup on the left-hand side, notice that our lump of sugar has dissolved into the water, but it is heavily concentrated on the inside of our cell. Over time, without the use of any energy required from the body, some of the sugar molecules will diffuse through the membrane towards the side in which the concentration was low or non-existent, which is the outside. Over time, what we'll see is an even distribution of the sugar molecules on both the inside and outside of the cell. Osmosis represents the next type of passive transport that we'll review here. Just as we've reviewed thus far, this type of passive transport does not require any energy from the body. When we refer to osmosis, it's also important to note that we're referring to a type of diffusion. However, this diffusion is specifically geared towards the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane. In the cup of water that we see towards the left, notice that we have an even level of water on both sides. However, we have an element, albumin, which is in differing concentrations on either side of our semi-permeable membrane. On one side, we have a 5% concentration of albumin, and on the other side, we have a total of 10% albumin. We call the amount of albumin in water our solute. In the same way, our 5% concentration of albumin means that we have 95% concentration of water on the left side, and our 10% concentration of albumin means that we have 90% water on the right side, although our water levels seem even. In this case, because we have an imbalance between the solute concentrations, water must pass through the semipermeable membrane. Water is able to pass through the semipermeable membrane because of small pores in the membrane that we refer to as aquaporins, or what we can call water channels. These are very small, minute holes within the membrane. Similar to what we've already seen, water will travel down its concentration gradient, moving from the place that it has a higher concentration, which is on the left-hand side, to the right, which there is a lower concentration of water. This next type of diffusion process that we'll look at is called channel-mediated diffusion. This process occurs when solutes or substances are usually too big, or if they don't have a certain charge, whether that be positive or negative. The green X that we see pictured here represents the channel we're speaking of, while the yellow lines and blue circles we see represent the plasma membrane. Now, the group of red and green circles that we see represent the elements on the outside of the cell membrane. Specifically, let's say that the green circles are what we're most interested in, and let's say that they represent glucose, also known as sugar. And let's say that the red circles represent other solutes outside the cell. The channel that we see here, which is also green, is an indication that this channel is one that allows for the ability of glucose to enter it. In the same way, the other molecules on the outside of the cell membrane, noted by the red circles, cannot pass through this channel or the plasma membrane directly. As a result, glucose molecules diffuse through this channel, allowing for transport into the cell. This example depicts a process that is utilized to supply our body with the energy we need to perform a variety of tasks. We'll review this in other facets throughout the remainder of the course. Similar to the process we just reviewed is another diffusion process, referred to as carrier-mediated diffusion. Just as we saw before, we have our cell membrane, and where we had our channel membrane, we now call this our carrier protein channel. This type of diffusion process occurs specifically for a certain type of element and usually nothing else, whereas the channel-mediated diffusion process allows for elements of differing sizes or charges to enter. So the image we're utilizing here represents a given solute. Notice its red color and the red color of the carrier membrane. This depicts the solute's attraction to the membrane. Notice that this carrier membrane modifies the shape of the initial solute so that it can pass through the plasma membrane. Now, we refer to this as a reformed solute.